Ever feel like your brain's just buzzing, like you're drowning in notifications and to-do lists?
Yeah, tell me about it. It's the curse of the modern world.
Totally.
Yeah.
So imagine saying, nope, I'm out, to all of that. No more distractions, just pure focus on, well, yourself.
You're talking about unplugging on a whole other level.
Yeah.
That's basically what early Christian monks did, except their unplugging lasted a lifetime.
Exactly. They went all in on this radical idea of self-discovery through isolation. And that's what we're diving into today, the world of early monasticism. We're time traveling back to the deserts of Egypt, 4th and 5th century style.
It's fascinating, really, because while it seems so extreme, these monks weren't just running away from the world. They were creating a system, almost like a technology,
A technology for what?
for trading the mind and spirit. And the thing is, their methods, as intense as they were, actually have some surprising parallels to modern psychology.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. So, no Wi-Fi, no social media, just you in the desert. What were the ground rules for this extreme mental makeover?
Well, imagine this. You're joining a community, and their whole purpose, their entire existence, revolves around getting closer to God. Every single thing was structured around that.
Sounds intense. So what, like a super strict prayer schedules? What else?
Silence. And I mean serious silence. We're not just talking about quiet time during prayers. These monks, they thought even a cough during chanting was disruptive.
Wait, seriously, a cough. Why was it such a big deal?
They believed that prayer, real prayer, required total focus, no distractions allowed. They took the Psalms literally with the spirit and the mind.
It makes you think, though. In our world of constant noise, when do we ever experience that kind of intentional quiet?
Right. It's a foreign concept these days. And it wasn't just about silence either. They were all about minimizing distractions, period. Strict rules against being alone with another monk. No touching, no unnecessary physical contact.
Wow, talk about creating boundaries. So how did one even become a monk in this super regimented world? Did you just show up at the monastery door like, hey, I'm ready to be silent?
Not quite. Think of it more like pledging a fraternity, but with a lot less partying and a lot more, well, hair shirts. You had to go through a whole year of testing before they even considered you.
Okay, now you have to spill the details. What kind of tests are we talking about?
First things first, you give up everything you own, all your possessions gone.
Right.
Radical act of detachment.
Wow, okay, so you're literally leaving your old life behind. What's next?
Next, you get a new wardrobe. And by wardrobe, I mean robes given to you by the abbot. They strip you of your old identity, literally and figuratively.
Talk about a makeover. And if you survived this trial period...
Then, and only then, were you officially counted among the brothers. But if you failed, it was back to the real world, no second chances.
Intense. So it's like a year of spiritual boot camp. And even if you got in, you didn't just get to hang out with the senior monks right away.
Right. They had these specific roles for the newbies. You'd care for guests, do humble tasks. It was all part of the process.
A year of testing, guest services, and a vow of silence, definitely not for everyone. But what I'm really curious about is this emphasis on obedience. It's like it was more than just following rules. It was a virtue in itself.
You're hitting on something really important there. Obedience wasn't just about blindly following rules. It was about surrendering your own will, letting go of your own desires for something bigger than yourself.
Okay, that's a pretty radical concept. We're talking about giving up your possessions, your old life, and now even your will. It's like the ultimate test of humility, right?
Exactly. They believed that by submitting to something outside themselves, to the abbot's authority in this case, they were getting closer to God.
So their whole day was structured around this idea of obedience.
Absolutely. A monk couldn't even leave his cell without the abbot's permission.
Wow. Talk about a structured life. It's like they were way ahead of the curve on this whole self-discipline thing.
Think about it. We talk about delaying gratification, about self-control as being crucial for personal growth, right?
All the time. It's like these monks were practicing ancient mindfulness techniques without even realizing it.
Exactly. They understood that real freedom came not from indulging every impulse, but from mastering yourself.
Okay, but how do you even begin to master yourself? Like, we all have those internal battles, those temptations that pop up.
Right. And these monks, they didn't shy away from that. They had a system for understanding and combating those inner demons we all face.
Okay, spill it. What was their secret weapon?
They called it the 8 thoughts of malice. Basically, a list of temptations, each one ready to derail a monk from his spiritual path.
Thoughts of malice. Sounds intense. Like, were they plotting world domination in their spare time?
Not quite, although I'm sure some days it felt like an epic battle.
Yeah.
We're talking about more relatable struggles. Gluttony, Fornication, avarice, the classics.
Okay, those I get. Even today, those are pretty universal struggles. What else made the list?
Well, it wasn't all about basic desires. They also included anger, sadness, those negative emotional states that can really drag you down.
It's interesting how they viewed these emotions as malicious. We tend to think of them as a natural part of life, but they saw them as threats to their spiritual well-being.
Exactly. They saw them as obstacles on the path to enlightenment, to inner peace. And the list doesn't stop there.
Oh, there's more. Lay it on me.
Rounding out their list of inner turmoil were vainglory and pride, probably the sneakiest of them all.
Vainglory and pride. Okay, so those are definitely aimed at the ego. It's like this list starts with our base desires, moves to our emotions, and ends with, like, attacks on the self.
You've got it. And here's the really brilliant part. They didn't just identify these thoughts, these temptations. They developed strategies to combat each and every one.
Now, that's what I call being proactive. So they believe they could actually train their minds to overcome these negative tendencies.
They were masters of what we might call today mindfulness or cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, now I need to hear about these strategies. How did they put this into practice?
Well, that's where the writings of John Cassian come in. He lived among these monks, observing their practices and really getting into the nitty-gritty of their techniques for, well, inner peace.
So Cassian is like our guide to this ancient wisdom. What kind of techniques did he write about?
Cassian, well, he was more than just a note-taker. He was really living this stuff, a true master of those inner battles.
Okay, so what were his biggest takeaways? How did he say we should actually deal with these thoughts of malice?
Let's take gluttony, for instance. The classic overindulging, right?
Yeah, I think we've all been there.
Right, so Cassian said it wasn't enough to just, not eat the extra slice of cake. You had to go deeper. You had to fast from the tempting thoughts themselves.
Fasting for your mind, that's next level.
It's about being mindful, really paying attention to what we let ourselves dwell on, resisting those cravings at the source.
So not just saying no to the cake, but saying no to the thought of the cake.
Exactly. He even talked about guarding your heart, not just your eyes, from those tempting images, because it all starts in the mind.
Wow. So much for treat yourself.
Right.
But I get it. It's about taking control, not letting those desires run the show.
Right. And it wasn't just about food. He had different approaches for each of those thoughts of malice. Like with anger, he said, don't get lost in what's making you angry. Instead, examine your reaction to it.
Ooh, that's tough. It's so easy to blame others, but you're saying we need to own that anger.
It's about understanding where it's coming from, not denying those emotions, but processing them in a healthier way. That's how you find inner peace.
So it's not about becoming emotionless, but about managing those emotions, finding balance.
Exactly. And that's what it all boils down to. Self-mastery. Training your mind and your heart. That was the goal for those monks.
It's like they built this whole system, this internal gym, to strengthen their minds.
And they knew it wasn't easy. It took serious discipline, a willingness to face their own darkness. But through that struggle, through self-reflection, they found their path.
It's kind of inspiring, right? It reminds us that looking inward is just as important as, if not more than, focusing on the outside world.
It really is. And while we might not all be cut out for the monastery life, we can still learn from their dedication.
We can create our own structure, our own practices that help us find that inner peace.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, we're all dealing with the same human experience. Those desires, those temptations, they're universal.
It's actually comforting in a weird way, knowing that even monks from centuries ago struggled with the same stuff.
And just like them, we have a choice. Let those desires control us or find a way to master them.
So what's the takeaway? If we want to apply a little bit of that monastic wisdom to our modern lives, where do we even begin?
It's about recognizing that the journey inward is just as important as the journey outward. We may not have the structure of a monastery, but we can create our own daily practices, our own rituals, things that help us cultivate stillness, self-awareness, and a deeper connection to ourselves and the world.
It's a call to action, isn't it? To be more intentional, to take responsibility for our inner state and find a way to live more authentically.
It's a lifelong journey, for sure, but it's worth it.
That's our deep dive into the world of early monasticism. It's a fascinating glimpse into a different way of life, and it definitely makes you think about your own habits and how you approach your own life. What resonates with you? Let us know on social media, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.